Hey everybody, welcome to the Atheist Experience Live. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Jen Peeples. Welcome.
Thank you.
You're doing more shows now. You went like forever months without doing
I
any.
know. Well,
now you're on all the time. What's up with that?
Well, actually, I haven't been on since the last scheduled time I was supposed to be on.
Is it just that you and I keep doing shows together?
Well, no, actually, my last show was with Russell.
How'd that go? Is he okay?
He's okay.
He's
a good guy. Yeah,
pretty good host?
Yeah, he's a pretty good guy.
Sweet. Yeah. Hey, it's Father's Day, June 17th, 2012. We're live here out of Austin, Texas. This is a live telephone call-in program, so it's kind of interactive, and you'll be able to call in and tell us what you believe and why. We're hoping to have some good conversations today, especially considering some of the emails we received this week. There were people who were offering to call in and prove that God exists and prove that evolution is false, which two completely unrelated topics, or mostly unrelated topics, but you know, we may learn all kinds of new things today. People asked if I was going to do anything special for Father's Day, and apart from wearing an extremely loud shirt in honor of all of those fathers who do this kind of thing, no, this is it. But we're gonna. Did you have anything you wanted to hit before we started taking calls? Or?
Oh, no, I just, had a local Baptist church who very helpfully left the God's Simple Plan of Salvation on my vehicle while I was parked at the airport this past week. So anyway, I now understand a little bit about God's Simple Plan of Salvation. It's got a lot of red ink. But anyway, yeah, that was interesting.
It's all there in black and white and red.
Yeah.
And, you know, this includes eternal separation from God in hell.
Yeah.
Which kind of sounds like heaven to me.
Yeah, we were talking about that. If it's the God described in the Bible, then that's actually a good thing.
Yeah, go ahead. Eternally separate me from that thug. But we've got, and you had something else.
Well, actually, what I have is a research article that was published in Science Magazine in the last week that one of the problems with dating Paleolithic art has always been the fact that it leaves very little carbon behind, so you can't really do carbon dating. Well, this is a research article that uses U-series dating for this Paleolithic art, and so actually I got some better numbers here. So it looks like the minimum age of some of this cave art is going to be around 35,000 years old, so there's another blow to young Earth creationism right there, because 35,000 years ago was way further back in time than 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. So anyway, that's what I have. If you are interested in learning more about U-series dating of Paleolithic art on 11 caves in Spain, the article is available on Science, and they even have supplemental material that describes the methodology, so you can investigate for yourself. And if you need some information about U-series dating, you can always go to talkorigins.org, I think it is, and they have a whole description of dating methods there. So that's just a little introduction to a research article, if anybody's interested.
Cool.
And I guess we have callers up.
Yeah, we've already got callers waiting.
Right.
By the way, you know, we're running 4 telephone lines. They're all from the same number, which they'll put up the bottom of the screen. For those of you who aren't aware, if you're in the Austin area, you're welcome to come down and watch the show live. There's seating in the studio. And after the show's over, we go to El Arroyo. There's been a lot of discussion about how we make use of those 4 lines, and I wanted to explain it really quickly. There's one number that comes in, there's a PBX system that branches it out to the 4 lines that we have in here, and we have a call screener in the studio, and basically they'll ask you what your name is, what you want to talk about. We are striving to keep 3 of the 4 lines open for theistic callers or callers who disagree or want to have some kind of discussion, so that only one of the 4 lines is kind of set aside for other atheists or people who are calling in to talk about something we're generally going to agree about. And we don't really screen against crazy. We also don't screen away really, I don't know, good theistic or creationist art. I don't know what this is. There are people who are like, oh, well, why do you keep getting all these really bad representatives of religious belief on the show? I don't know. get a hold of your minister, get a hold of your favorite apologist, give them the telephone number. We're on. I mean, we take calls. I mean, I had Ray Comfort on the show, although he got the same feedback of why did you have, these people who are bad at representing Christianity on the show. Matt Slick was on to talk about tag ages ago. I don't really, we don't do anything to say, oh, no, we're not taking calls from that. There are a couple of people who've been banned from the show for being either ignorant bigots or just way too crazy. There was the guy who kept calling in to tell me how I could build a homemade mirror and take it out to a creek and tie a rope around my waist, and that would put me in touch with the spirit world, and I had to avoid being sucked in. We're trying to stay away from that level of crazy. But the fact of the matter is that I was a Christian for 25 plus years. I wasn't crazy. I do think I was delusional about my particular religious beliefs. I may or may not have gotten smarter, depending on how you want to define smarter. My IQ didn't go up, though. What happened was I learned a bit more, and I thought a bit more, and I stopped accepting the comforting illusion of certainty that really wasn't supported by evidence. And so that's kind of how I got to where I'm at right now. And what we do on the show is take live calls, interact with people in the hopes of having decent discussions and getting information out. I'm not necessarily trying to change the mind of the person on the other end of the phone. But if it happens, hey, great. We get email from people, sometimes 2 or 3 years apart, where it's, hey, I used to email you guys or call you guys, and now I'm one of you. Well, cool.
Yeah. I just got an email this weekend from a guy that I apparently had interacted with a couple of years ago, who was a Christian or a theist at the time. I think he was probably a Christian. I haven't looked it up, but basically he emailed back saying, "Hey, thanks. I was pretty naive in my beliefs back then, and I've learned a lot since then, and so now he's a non-believer." So it does have an impact being exposed to the truth. And a little bit of what you were saying about people writing to us. One of the things that's kind of a pet peeve of mine is people who write to us saying, hey, don't you think some people need religion, and don't you think you're doing them a disservice by taking that away from them? And first of all, I think that there's very few things I can think of in life that are more disrespectful of someone than patting them on the head and saying, yeah, you're right. You're one of those people that actually needs false beliefs because you can't handle the truth.
Yeah.
That is incredibly disrespectful. When I'm challenging a theist's claims, I'm not being disrespectful of that person. In fact, that's showing some respect for their intellect. Because I believe that they can reason their way through this.
Yeah, I think there are some people, I've said before that there are some people who are perhaps beyond the reach of reason, that, we may have to wait for some portions of some generations to actually die off. There are people who are going to go to their grave believing this no matter what's actually said. It's unfortunate, but you're talking about how do you guys are taking away no, I'm not taking anything away. People are giving it up. And that's what I'm encouraging. I've said many times that I am absolutely opposed to the idea of legislating religion away or attempting to take religion away by force. We're talking about having conversations and encouraging people to think and question. And if they give up religion, if their religion, or if they give it up entirely, if they embrace reality, hey, that's great. And by the way, it happens all the time. I'm walking, talking proof that it happens. And so are most of the people involved in the show. I don't have hatred for religious people. I have a great deal of hatred for religious ideas. And there are some religious individuals who I think it would be fair to say that I actually do hate them. And it's because I'm convinced that, and I'm talking about a very small set of apologists who I think are being intentionally deceptive. They've bought into this idea so strongly that even though they themselves may not believe it, they continue to misrepresent everything that's in opposition to them. They misrepresent atheists, they misrepresent science. It's a level of intentional dishonesty that I find kind of repugnant. But so you ready for calls?
Sure.
We got Mike in, is it Dillon, Colorado?
That's correct.
Hi, how are you doing?
Hey, doing very well. I had a question. I remember back, maybe even like junior high or high school, they give you the examples for evolution. They're like the peppered moth and the fruit flies, and I forget some of the other ones. But anyway, I kind of remember that, and I mean, I didn't really question anything back then. But like a few times since then, I've kind of thought of that, about like fruit fly evolution, like as evidence for Darwinian evolution. And the other day, I had some free time, and like I kind of looked it up, and I could only find like negative things online about it, like why it's not evidence for Darwinian evolution. So I was wondering, I mean, is there another side that says it's good evidence for Darwinian evolution?
Okay, I think I kind of have to unpack some language here real quick, and just for clarity, I'm not an expert on fruit fly evolution or evolution in general. I don't have any formal training in these areas. But what I can say is that my understanding is that, I mean, you're saying, is fruit fly evolution really an example of Darwinian evolution? Well, of course it is. Evolution is evolution is evolution. It's not like, I don't even know how we can try and draw lines like that.
Well, I see what you're saying, and more specifically the experiments, not just like observing like the ways that fruit flies, like small variations. I'm talking about, the experiment where apparently fruit flies are perfect for this because they reproduce so fast, and so they bombard them with all this radiation, and so you can get hundreds of thousands of years worth of evolution within 10, 20 years worth of experiments of these fruit flies.
Yeah, so they're good for studying things like they reproduce relatively fast. Their genome has already been mapped. We can we can watch the changes occur. Now, the objections that I tend to see to things like this are people, there are people who will say things like, well, yeah, but you haven't seen a fruit fly turn into a dog. And that's such a misrepresentation of what evolution is about. Evolution, by the way, is a fact. It occurs. It's an observed occurrence, right down to speciation, by the definition of speciation being creatures that can't interbreed.
Well, and even more, the fruit fly experiments are an illustration of this fact.
Now,
does it illustrate that? Because with Darwinian evolution, in hundreds of thousands of years, you can get animals that are very different from each other. You can get those differences. So I guess that's the thing that they're pointing out is why don't we see that?
The thing is, there's no guarantee. There's no path. There's no plan. So there's no guarantee that in X amount of time you're going to see X amount of change. And so when you look at things like artificial selection, the breeding of dogs, we get all these dog breeds from wolves, and you get incredible diversity right from Chihuahuas to Great Danes and things like that, in a relatively short amount of time. The time scale for what we're normally talking about when we talk about the evolutionary history of the planet is much, much more vast than that. And so even though we can look at a lot of different generations of fruit flies, we're doing this in a controlled experimental way. So, there's no expectation from the scientists that they're going to keep breeding fruit flies and all of a sudden they're going to get a generation of dragonflies or something like that. That's just not the way it works.
Well, what do you mean it's not the way? That is how it works. Hundreds of thousands of years, you could get something that's not too different, a dragonfly and a fruit fly. That is how it works, right?
The fact that it's possible within X number of generations to see this sort of change doesn't mean that you're going to see that kind of change in every species genome. It doesn't mean that you're going to see that change in every experiment that you do. You pointed out the reason we use fruit flies is because they reproduce rather quickly and abundantly, and their genome's mapped, and we can track these changes. But to have an expectation that because of this, we can do kind of, super rapid, massive species change is, I think, absurd, because the one thing you have to realize is that, fruit flies, they reproduce really quickly, but they've been doing that for a really, really, really long time on their own.
Yeah.
So, the fact that, in the few years, a few decades that we've been doing research on this, we haven't produced incredible, massive changes. It isn't an argument against evolution. It's exactly what we'd expect. We're looking at very small changes in the genome. The fruit flies are good because we're able to see drift by generation, and that may vary between species.
Well, let me give you an example. There was actually a research article published, I believe it was actually in Science magazine, or maybe it was another source. I don't know. But anyway, I was reading this recently. It was just published a couple of years ago, and it was about a change that occurred in fruit flies. It was an evolutionary change, and it actually had nothing to do with genes. What happened, or at least only peripherally related to genes. Fruit flies are subject to parasitic infections. In this one species of fruit fly, they get this parasitic worm that inhabits the host body, swells up, releases larvae, and it doesn't kill the fruit fly, but the fruit fly doesn't have the energy to reproduce. And so obviously that's, there's no path to future generations in that case. What's happened is that some fruit flies have become susceptible to a bacterial infection that normally protects aphids from parasitic infections. So what we have is some kind of probably genetic vulnerability to a bacterial infection that also now protects the fruit flies. And so what's happening is that the fruit flies who have this, who are susceptible to this bacterial infection, are now more successful at reproduction than fruit flies that aren't. And so what we're seeing is a very rapid evolution in fruit fly populations. So there's an example of evolution. It is occurring.
Yeah. See, I'm not sure that's, I mean, you got fruit flies, and they changed a little bit, and you end with fruit flies. I mean, I don't think anybody would deny that. I don't see...
Well, that's good, because biologists are looking at that saying, yep, that's evolution in action.
Okay, but how is that evidence for Darwinian evolution? Like,
what do you mean by Darwinian evolution?
Go ahead.
What do you mean by Darwinian evolution?
Yeah, I mean, like, we all share a common ancestor, like, not just
right.
Oh, okay.
Oh, well.
Okay. The fruit fly experiments are an opportunity to look at changes in the genome. But as I pointed out, it doesn't matter that they're reproducing faster, that you're seeing a raw number of change in a difference in the number of generations between fruit flies than, for example, humans. You can look at many generations of fruit flies within a generation of humans. You are looking at it as, hey, wait a minute, we still haven't produced anything with fruit flies. Guess what? We will never produce anything that isn't considered a fruit fly, because it's always going to be a descendant of a fruit fly. Just like we're still apes. When you look at it, I don't know why you would look at fruit fly evolution and say, is this confirmation of this broader idea of speciation? Well, first of all, it's not the only point of data that we have. Common ancestry has been confirmed not just through the fossil record, but through DNA evidence. And even, we've mentioned it before, but Francis Collins, who's an evangelical Christian and former head of the Human Genome Project, said that even if there wasn't any fossil evidence, the DNA evidence alone would be enough to confirm common ancestry with the other apes. And we've looked at the fusion of chromosome 2, so we know, to the extent that we know anything, we know that we share a common ancestor with the other great apes on the planet. And this idea tracing back that all life originates from one tiny population, I don't know, it's a bit of an inference, I would say, because you have the ability to compare the DNA of all living things on the planet. It's all interrelated. And then you have the fossil record, which actually supports all of that. And so I don't know why anyone would look at fruit flies and say, oh, they're still producing fruit flies, so that can't be evidence for evolution. What it is it's evidence for, or it's a way to test and observe the change in genetic code over generations. Now, over generations is different from over time and between or through the process of speciation. But fruit flies have actually, I'm pretty sure, there's 3,000 different described species of fruit flies, and I'm pretty sure that in the process of observing them, we have new species. They still get classified as fruit flies, but they're now different species. And if you begin breeding them off of there, you could see changes, but you don't necessarily know what potential changes there can be beginning with a fruit fly genome.
Okay, so I mean, you're kind of saying that with Darwinian evolution, over hundreds of thousands of years, you can get, you can result in vastly different animals. But with fly evolution, we should not expect to see, with the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of years, vastly different animals.
I'm not saying hundreds of thousands of years. You're saying hundreds of thousands of years. We're talking about millions of years. But yes, the fact that fruit fly... what's a good analogy for this?
Well,
I think I see where you're going. I mean, you could say that. You could say, look, it takes millions of years to get differences. Fruit fly evolution has only accounted for hundreds of thousands of years. So, I mean, is that what you're saying?
The point, no. I'm not just comparing the fact. Okay, there is the idea that, let's say, one of them runs faster, but they're running faster in the same grand scope as those of us who are running slower. So clearly, they change much more slowly, or there's a decrease in the amount.
They adapt to selection pressure, or they respond to selection pressure faster because they have a faster reproductive rate.
Well, if they adapt to that faster,
you're looking at it.
Even more evidence. I mean, you wouldn't want to say that. That would hurt your case, right?
No.
No. Why would it hurt my case? It's a fact. Fruit flies, animals that reproduce at a faster rate, can respond to selection pressure as a species faster than animals that reproduce at a slower rate. That is a fact.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, well, because you could say, if let's say they just, for some reason, it's just a scientific fact that fruit flies just, they respond to these things super slow, then you could say, well, that's why. It's because fruit flies just respond real slow, so you wouldn't expect to see big changes.
Sure.
Okay.
And yet what you're saying, no, what you're saying is that we're not seeing big changes, therefore this is a problem for Darwinian evolution. And what we're saying is, no, it's not a problem for Darwinian evolution, because Darwinian evolution doesn't say that in this number of generations of fruit flies you should expect big changes.
The Darwinian evolution doesn't say that in hundreds and thousands of years worth of evolution.
No, it doesn't.
No, this isn't hundreds of thousands of years worth of evolution.
Huh? What is it?
The fact that fruit flies reproduce and have multiple generations in the space of one of our generations doesn't mean that they've gone through hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. They've still gone through the same number of years. There are just more generations.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of 100, because they blast them with the radiation themselves. They don't just like sit them around and watch them, for like 1 year per 1 year. So it's 100,000 years worth of evolution.
No, it's
wow.
generations. But all that aside, is it your contention that that we should see fruit flies evolving into something else?
Yeah, if you give them the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of years worth of evolution, yes.
No, you don't understand how evolution works. That's
just from the article.
No. What's the selection?
It's not.
What is the selection pressure that's driving them to evolve?
The ones in the experiments?
Yeah.
With the selection pressure. Well, I mean, they pick the ones. I mean, they can like selectively mate them based on the mutations that they get.
Okay. So
yeah.
So you can artificially select how they interact and therefore drive selection of specific traits. Okay. And this can result in a speciation event. So you get two species of fruit flies that cannot interbreed. Right?
Okay.
Okay. Nature can do the same thing.
Yes.
Okay. That's evolution.
That's it. That's your case. Right?
That's a basic mechanism of evolution.
Stop.
How can you not understand this?
No, yeah, I understand that. I mean, but the hundreds of thousands of years, that's not just like a creationist website.
Stop with the 100,000 of years.
First of all, how dare you say that's it? That's your case for evolution? No, sir. The case for evolution is much, much broader than that. I didn't actually shut up for a moment. I didn't raise fruit flies and say this is the whole case for evolution. Evolution is a study of life and the changes in life. And the fruit fly experiments that you're talking about study one aspect of this. I also mentioned the fossil evidence, the DNA evidence, etc., and the fact that your understanding of this is fundamentally flawed. That the fact that we can witness, we can observe many, many more generations of fruit flies doesn't mean that we should have expected big changes like you're talking about, like a fruit fly to a dragonfly or a dog or whatever. It's not a predictive process.
Okay, yeah, I didn't mean, when I said case for, I meant case against fruit fly evolution, not case for like the entire thing. Yeah, this is not like a debate over the entire thing of evolution. But let me just say that, I mean, before you cut me off and say I'm not allowed to say this, I mean, that's like the articles from like Science Magazine. They had one that celebrated, there was like a 100-year anniversary, and they were celebrating the fruit fly experiments, talking about how it represented hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. That's not like a creationist nonsense type thing.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you misinterpreted what that said.
Where it said it represented hundreds of thousands of years worth of evolution?
Well, you've latched onto this hundreds of thousands of years without understanding that it represents.
Yeah, it represents hundreds of thousands of years.
That doesn't mean that in 100,000 years of evolution we're going to get something different.
100,000 years ago? What do you think humans looked like 100,000 years ago?
I think it'd be different.
Okay, how much different?
I don't know, 82%?
82% different? Do
Wow.
you realize that we share 96% of our DNA with chimpanzees?
Yeah, but we're more than 4% different than them. I mean, look, this
Actually,
kind
we're
of
not.
evolving
No.
into something else. Yeah, I mean,
okay.
the article said what it said. I'm sorry, you're kind of fighting me on that. I mean, that's not really the gist of my call.
I find
You know
it
what?
hilarious that you can agree that we share 96% of our, and by the way, that number may not be completely accurate, but if you agree that we share 96% of our DNA with chimps, and then you can say that we're more than 4% different. What? What's your criteria for different?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're very much different than apes, or what, chimpanzees, is that what you said?
Sure, and
Okay.
and what? Okay, but if we're
Yeah,
4%
just
different,
citing that we're 96% similar in DNA, I don't think that necessarily, I mean, I guess in in that particular, like in DNA, yes, we are only that much different.
there we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where did you come up with that we're 82% different from chimps?
Well, I thought you were talking about like how different are we? Like you didn't say different in the genome. Like how different are we? I think we're very different. And gee, I just made up 82%.
Sure,
You just
sure.
said
What you're
Yes.
doing is coming up with some gut feeling definition of difference and pulling a number out of your ass for it. The fact that you intuitively look at something and say, wow, this is really, really different from this, doesn't have any impact at all on how different it actually is. And when we're talking about the science of evolution, the science of genetics, there's a criteria, there's an established measurement, essentially, for how different we are. And so what difference does it make if to you intuitively we seem 82% different?
Okay, so you went down the road with animals 96%. So what does that have to do with my question?
Well, since your question was about fruit fly evolution, I guess not a lot.
Okay, well, I mean, yeah,
What does your question have to do with evolution?
Well, my question was, how does the fruit fly experiments demonstrate Darwinian evolution? So
Sure,
how does a lot to do with
it
evolution?
demonstrates it by being able to observe changes in the genome over generations at a rate that we cannot necessarily observe in other species. But you would also experience that if there weren't Darwinian evolution, so that's not really evidence. No.
What?
If Darwinian evolution isn't true, then you wouldn't have the genetic variation over generations to observe. Darwinian
If
evolution
is not true, then you would not have genetic variations. You wouldn't have some flies with big wings and some with small. That's not true.
No. You're looking at the in species and saying there would be no variation. I fully agree, I fully admit that if Darwinian evolution isn't true, that it might be possible for there to be a universe where there are different creatures. However, However, what we're talking about is we are observing genetic changes over generations. That is evolution by definition.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. That's why I always specify Darwinian evolution.
There is only evolution. What is Darwinian evolution? Why is that different from evolution?
Well, you can have speciation as evolution. I mean, you got like strong fruit flies would be more likely to produce stronger fruit flies. That's evolution. That's speciation.
Yep.
But that's not Darwinian evolution.
Why not?
What's Darwinian evolution?
Because Darwinian evolution is like we all came from the same ancestor, like humans.
It's the same thing.
Yes, totally common descent is one of the pillars of evolution.
Same thing.
It's not the same thing, because you can have one without the other, so it's not the same thing.
The actual scientists say it's the same thing.
So if without Darwinian evolution, you couldn't even have speciation. You couldn't have variation in species.
I don't know why you keep saying Darwinian evolution, but yes.
So without Darwinian evolution, but they knew about speciation before they knew about Darwinian evolution. So
well, you know what? They knew that things fell down before we learned about gravity. What difference does that make?
Well, gravity is things falling down. That's not really a good example.
No, that's actually not what gravity is.
We're done.
Thank you.
Jay in Minneapolis, thanks.
Hi, Matt. I'm happy to finally talk to you. I'm a fan of your show. I've been watching lots of YouTube clips. I've only seen maybe one or two shows in entirety, but and even though I don't always like what I'm hearing on the air, it's like, well, wait a minute, that makes me think. Why should I have a negative emotional reaction? That's probably a good reason I need to look at, say, my own beliefs that much closer, or really think about stuff. And so I'm a fan of the show, despite having a bit of ups and downs at times.
Sure, thanks for saying so, Jay. And by the way, you almost made it through an entire show on hold because
I noticed that
we let him go on about fruit flies for 25 minutes.
Yeah. Before I say any more, I just want to say if my voice gets a little funny or I have a mental lapse, I'm sorry, because I had a head injury years ago, and that's why originally I emailed your show, and they said I should just call in, but I'm not as good on the phone as I am in email, so I just wanted to mention that.
Me neither.
Anyway, I'm calling to represent a theistic perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a skeptic, and yet I'm a believer, and I hoped maybe you could help cure me of my belief.
Okay. Because there's one thing I love is curing skeptics who think that theism is
cure me
consistent.
of my theistic side.
Oh, no. I am a skeptic. I like helping skeptics who think that theism is consistent with their skepticism because they're just wrong.
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead, Jay.
Okay. Anyway, the problem that I have is I don't know if it's enough to simply disregard evidence that seems to support theism because I don't want something to be true. In other words, I think at times atheists can be prejudiced against information that they should at least consider rather than disregard out of hand. Like in the same way.
I agree. I think saying that you want to disregard things because you don't want them to be true, I think that's intellectually dishonest. It's a failure of skepticism and critical thinking, and I oppose it.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, we're in agreement then. Well, here's my basic position. I'm a skeptic. I'm still a believer. I've had personal experience, but I'm well aware that I can't prove that personal experience to others. Mm-hmm. So this is if I talk about stuff, this is the reason that I believe. I don't in any way, shape, or form think that this is a reason you need to believe or even trust me, because I'm aware I could be lying, I could be exaggerating, I could be mentally ill.
Hey, Jay.
All those things are possible, so nothing counts as proof for another. I'm just saying, well, this is why I believe myself.
Sure, and Jay, if that's the case, okay, you started off by saying that you've had personal experiences that wouldn't count for somebody else, and I agree. Revelation is necessarily first person, and everybody else that's here say that's Hume 101. My question is, why do your personal experiences on their own, why are they sufficient to convince you of the truth of it when you understand that we have all sorts of personal experiences that aren't interpreted in a way that maps to truth?
Right. Well, my reason for that is, like I said to the guy on the phone, I don't know whether it's reasonable to disregard the context of certain circumstances. The example I gave on to the handler on the phone was like, if a person prayed to win the lottery and then say she actually won the lottery, that could be coincidence, you know. An interesting one, but still a coincidence. If she went around to every state in the U.S. and every time she prayed she won the lottery so that she literally just gave away winning tickets, I would think that it's counting as something more than just, you know, well, you could, if you look at any individual
I would
piece,
too.
the individual...
Yeah,
I would too, Jay.
Okay.
That's extraordinary. And now at that point we have demonstrated that there is some phenomenon there that we should investigate. We still can't say what the cause of it is, but if there was a person who ran around to every state and prayed and kept getting winning lottery tickets, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, that would be pretty amazing. I agree. And I just use that because I need an extreme example to see whether, you know, if any level of evidence even qualifies.
Well, the thing is, the thing is on the point that I was making there is that at that point we would have a demonstration that there's something to investigate. We would not have any justification for accepting that we understood what the cause of this was.
Right. Okay, and I would totally agree with that point. Because my personal reasons for believing are experiences of prayers being answered or seeing prayers being answered where the context matters. Again, this is where I'm having a difficulty because I'm aware my skeptical mind is fighting against my personal experience. Mm-hmm. And this is, I mean, I'm trying to figure out the best way to put it into words because I've either firsthand seen or known enough people that have had things that even either doctors or we'll say veterinarians have called miracles. And the reason that I mention veterinarians is because humans can have a placebo effect. A human, you can tell them, we're going to pray for you at 8 p.m. tonight. We will all make sure you're better. And if that lady has a miraculous, let's say she has cancer and she suddenly starts feeling very peaceful and starts on the road to health at 8 p.m., well, that's a very good hypnosis. That's not necessary proof of anything. But when you're talking about, say, praying for a pet animal, the animal has no hypnosis. You can't have a placebo effect on an animal. And I have seen cases where prayer for the health of it, like an example would be a friend's cat had, I believe it was liver cancer, and the vet said, you know, he'll be dead within 48 hours, you know, gasping for air and stuff like that. And at the time people prayed from a distance, the cat suddenly started breathing normally and literally like the next day was like nothing had happened. And again, the reason I gave the multiple lottery ticket winning example was if it's one incident, that could be a coincidence, an interesting one, but just a coincidence. But I have experienced this over and over and over again, and none of this means that I can't show here's a peer-reviewed journal talking about my friend, and like I said, I could be lying, I could be exaggerating, I could even be mentally ill and hallucinated the whole thing. I'm aware of every argument that could be said against what I'm claiming right now. You don't have anything except, you know, you're giving me the benefit of the doubt to let me say that this is true.
Well, my claim is, or what my reaction to that would be is first of all, let's say can you give me just a number so that I'm not pulling numbers out of the air? How many times you think people have prayed for pets and they got better?
That I personally know of?
Sure, and I won't just dismiss the number. I just want a number so I can talk about it.
For pets, probably 4. For humans, it's more in the dozens of categories, and it includes some very serious stuff like terminally ill people told they would be dead in 10 days.
You can't hear me. It's a problem with the phones. It's not your fault, Jay. There's a problem with the phones where you can't hear if I'm actually talking. So let's say that I had 4 occasions where I knew that a pet was sick or had been told that a pet was sick, and people prayed for it and the pet got better. What can I actually say about that? Well, first of all, I'm not a vet. I didn't examine the pet. I can't rule out the possibility that the vet was wrong. I cannot rule out the possibility of remission. I also am, I don't know that there's been any sort of study into this to show that these particular pets were ill and got better. But let's assume best case scenario. Let's assume that I was in fact a vet and that I had medical documentation of the illness of these animals, and somebody prayed for them, and I had documentation after that they were better, and there were 4 of these. I would have to start by saying, okay, that's cool. Maybe there's something here. How would we go about investigating it? And I'm not exactly sure what the answer would be, but what I do know is that I couldn't possibly believe that we had demonstrated anything causal to believe in until we had done our due diligence in the testing.
Right, and that you are kind of in the same, you're theoretical, that's kind of the position where I am right now. As a skeptic, I have to say, some of these could have been flukes, some of these could have been someone exaggerating, but to me, it's like I've seen so much of it. There's, like I said, 1 or 2 or 3 or even 5 or 8 experiences I could disregard. But to me, the experiences with animals just added to the dozens of experiences I knew much more closely. And they did, for people, it included people that had documentation before and documentation after of something, where they were literally terminally ill with something, and then afterwards they didn't have any trace of the disease type of thing. And I'm not saying that this proves this means Christianity is real. I've never liked it when people instantly they interpret every miracle as a Christian one. How do you know it wasn't the Muslim spirit? How do you know it wasn't the Jewish spirit that just wasn't prejudiced against your Christian?
Jay, I had to put you on hold. I'm sorry. It's the only way that we can get this to work with the phones. So if you're not, what exactly is it that you believe because of this?
What I believe because of this, let me think for a second.
Because you said that you're not advocating for a Christian God, or at most, as a skeptic, the most I could say is that I've seen something unusual that I don't have an explanation for. I couldn't possibly call myself a theist because of it. I certainly couldn't get to Christianity. I'm not even completely sure that I could say that there'd been any sort of phenomenon that had been demonstrated enough to call it that, but it would be a curiosity for which I didn't have an explanation. So it's about...
Well, the biggest part of my question is, am I wrong in using the context to weight my belief more strongly, or to weight the evidence more strongly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and what is the error of reason that I'm doing that? What is because this is what I believe, and this is why, and it's yes, I am weighting these experiences, but there is such a weight of experiences that it's really hard for me. It feels like I'm being prejudiced, disregarding things out of hand.
No, Jay. We're not talking about disregarding things out of hand. We're not talking about that. When we said you're making an error by considering the context, it's because one of the things about justifying knowledge, the scientific process, is to remove those things that you're calling context that may represent bias, those things that may lead us to sharpshooter fallacies of, oh, this got better and there was prayer, so I'm circling this one. What you would need to do is look at it either absent those specific contexts, or in the broader context of how often are people praying for pets and they're not getting better? How often are pets getting better when nobody prayed for them?
Well, I don't have any disagreement with that, and I certainly could say yes. The one reason that I can't really say I'm representing a Christian perspective, although I've heard other people use this to justify their Christian belief, where they say, well, my prayers were answered in a certain way, and lots of people use it, but most people want to apply that to some very, very minor things. All I'm saying is I've had experiences which are well beyond minor experiences, and as trying to be the best skeptic I can be, All I can
honestly,
say
Jay,
is I'm not sure what the next step is. Like, how do I, I would like to know what's going on myself, and I would like to know what the difference is.
Sure.
Well,
Jen's gonna.
Well, I think you're engaging in a little confirmation bias. So
Okay.
I think you're seeing the results that you would like to be true, and you're attributing a cause to them that may not be justified. Are you aware of the prayer studies that have been done?
I've heard of various studies upon prayer, and basically, unless they were done by Christians, they all come up. There's no difference at all.
Right. Yeah.
Here's what I.
There's no effect.
Here's what I think happened, Jay. In all honesty,
Okay.
I think that you have a slight misconception and a little bit of fear about saying that you don't believe something, because you're conflating that with believing it is false. You keep going to, I need to disregard all of this, and I don't want to say that I don't believe something for bad reasons. There's a difference between saying I don't believe this is true and saying I believe this is false. And by saying that you simply don't have enough evidence to believe it's true, you are not disregarding the possibility. Atheism, by the way, is not the absolute assertion that there are no gods, that this is impossible. We're not shrugging this stuff off. We're not disregarding anything. We're saying these claims haven't met their burden of proof. And if, granted, I haven't had your individual experience, but if I had, in order for me to remain, intellectually honest and justified in my positions, I still couldn't say, oh, I'm a theist, and I won't stop calling myself a theist until I have much, much better reason. I would have to say, no, I'm an atheist, and this is really interesting, and as soon as we can actually demonstrate that there's something real there, my atheism may change, but we're not at that point yet.
Well, that may be where I'm getting stuck in a mental loop, because I'm aware of confirmation bias, and I've tried to just trying to be conscious of it and saying, let me be as objective about this as possible. Everything I've done that I can think of has been done, and yet I still have that problem that I have all these experiences that at the least are inexplicable. They don't necessarily, that to my mind, they tell me something's going on even if I don't know what it is.
Well, yeah. If you're convinced that something's going on but you don't know what it is, congratulations.
Yeah.
You're an atheist.
Well, I mean something beyond what is commonly accepted by science, or possibly even in the peer-reviewed journals. Because one thing about I didn't go much into my own personal background, but what I'm a part of is actually anti-proselytizing, where I'm specifically told not to convert other people. So this is kind of the opposite position of many that think that, oh, okay, I had this experience, now I need to preach to the world. No, this is something that I'm just kind of privately brooding over in my own thoughts, trying to understand what's going on, because if I look at the evidence of other people, there doesn't, everything, they study prayer, it doesn't seem to work for them, and yet I see the evidence of it working for a certain group of people. Now, I'm aware that could mean that it's a very unfair God that only speaks to this one sect or this one group of people.
Sure.
But I still have all these personal experiences that, I don't know how else to interpret them, because if I go by, I've talked to atheists before, and they've told me things not dissimilar to this, that they think either, well, maybe the evidence was exaggerated, or maybe there's too many. Well, if you've talked with people,
Jay, the problem with all of that is that you're shifting the burden of proof. You're saying, I've talked to atheists before and they've offered me alternative explanations. I'm not going to offer you an alternative explanation. I don't even care if we have an alternative explanation. My point is that we do not have any explanation, and therefore believing that you have an explanation is irrational.
Well, wouldn't the position be that prayer actually works under certain circumstances? I mean, it may not be correct.
No, why would you think that?
How did you determine that prayer works under certain circumstances? How did you come to that conclusion?
The examples like I've been given.
Well,
So have you categorized them and determined what it was about those prayers that was different from the prayers that didn't work?
I mean, I could say crossing my fingers works in certain circumstances.
Well, I've actually tried to categorize certain things and try and understand why is it working for some people rather than others. And other than they seem to be a part of, a non-mainstream group, I'm not sure what else to tell you. I mean, it seems to work better for others and less for
Well, if you
some
figure
people.
out what it is, why don't you tell the kids over in Africa that are starving, because I'm sure they'd like to know what prayers would work so they wouldn't starve to death.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
the thing-
I'd like to be able to say that too, but like I said, it's not a proselytizing version, and that's part of the problem.
Well, my
That
thing, Jay, is that you're going through here, and I have no idea what your expertise is, but you're going through and saying, "Oh, I've tried really hard, and it seems to work for some people better than others." Okay, so take those people that it seems to work for and test them and demonstrate that it actually does work for them. Because if you find out in those people that it seems to work for better, that they don't actually work any better than chance, which is what you would want to demonstrate, then we're back at no phenomenon to test. However, if they do test out better than chance, you could get a Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
Well, and I hear the giggling in the background. I'm aware of this, but this is my quandary here. What I have seen is that it does test better than chance. And
Okay,
yet
where's the
yeah.
data? Where, have you published this?
No, and that's the problem.
Why
This
not?
isn't proselytizing. This is not
No,
trying
no,
to
no, no,
convert
no.
the world.
This is
And I'm at.
Jay,
It's not proselytizing. This is important information.
Yeah, this to me,
Yeah,
that
I'm
to
aware.
me, that to me, Jay, I hate to be rude, but that smacks of incredible dishonesty. It reminds me
Yeah.
of the people who claim that they could win the JREF Million Prize because they're psychics, but they won't do it because they're not greedy. And I'm like, win the $1 million and give it to somebody who needs it. This isn't about proselytizing. This is about truth. If you have demonstrated that there's a process by which people can appeal to something outside of nature and actually get results, and you're not telling people about it, you're a dick.
I think that's getting a little mean here. I'm trying to be
Hey,
honest.
it is
and
what it
I
is.
am acknowledging the paradox.
Jay, if I
comfortable with everything either.
Jay, if I had the cure for cancer and said that I wasn't going to go out and telling people and informing people because I didn't want to proselytize, would I not be a dick? Isn't prayer the cure for fucking cancer? That's what I'm talking about, and I promise you, Jay, I'm not just attacking you. I mean, I'm passionate about this because I care about truth, and it drives me nuts when people, and it seems to work, and I think we've demonstrated it. Great! Wouldn't that be the most awesome thing ever? Why would anybody try to hide it? I think that you are avoiding it in order to help continue to deceive yourself into believing what you want to believe. This
Yes.
isn't about you not trying to, I don't want to believe this, so I don't want to give it up. You desperately want to believe this. Can you come up with any other reason why you wouldn't tell people about the cure for cancer and everything?
The only counter I can offer to that is that I've been told explanations of why not to proselytize things, whether I like them or not, or stuff like that. I mean, I'm kind of along for the ride until I figure out what's going on. I'm trying not to rock the boat too much. Hey, if I let me put it this way: if I can figure out what the secret is and come out and tell the world, I give you my word, I will do so.
Great.
I'm not
Great.
trying.
We look forward to
be
it.
secretive about this. I'm trying to figure out did I stumble across something that actually works without ticking off those that seem to be a part of it too much, that they won't continue to tell me about this stuff.
You know
And yet,
what? If I had the cure,
skepticism,
if I could cure cancer and world hunger and all those things just by revealing a little secret, I wouldn't give a shit who I pissed off.
You know what else?
Yeah, well, if I figure out what the secret is, I'm not going to give a crap either.
Yeah, that's fine, and I applaud you for that, Jay. Because the only reason I went to the "you'd be a dick" is because I don't think you are. I think you're a nice person, and I'm trying to expose the hypocrisy here. But you know what else is really, really, really crazy? This idea that there's a select group of people who are appealing to some God who will answer their prayers. That there's some secret mechanism here. Isn't that God a dick?
I couldn't disagree with you, actually. I've been asking that question since I got involved in this, to be honest. I mean, I thought this seems incredibly unfair that I should somehow stumble across something that actually has some better than zero probability of working, or some group of people that seem to have actually figured out something. Why isn't it available to everyone else?
Yeah, I'd encourage you. We're almost out of time, Jay, but I'd encourage you definitely to keep looking at it. I'm going to try and take one more call before the show's over. Thanks so much for calling in, and call us back when you find out more.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Wow.
So we're not going to get quite as many calls in today, but I have enjoyed the hell out of them. So we've got, whoops, oh crap. Matt, are you there? Hello?
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 Is this Matt from Oslo?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
You're on.
Is this Matt?
Oh. No, actually, no. I just called and you switched on to me.
Yeah, I accidentally hung up on Matt from Oslo, Norway, and you were just waiting to call in and happened to get lucky.
Oh, well, thank you.
Unfortunately, I'm going to put you on hold because we're almost out of time, and I got one last thing I want to get to, but we'll try and answer it after the show's over. Kelly in Wichita, thanks for waiting.
Hi.
You only have like 20 seconds.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to talk about, you talk about the problem of religion sometimes, and this is on just a really small scale. But I lent the book, The God Delusion, to my brother the other week because he was starting to question things. He lives with my parents. I was raised Catholic, and my family's still Catholic. He left it on the kitchen counter, and my mom took scissors to it.
Awesome.
And he asked,
Wow.
where the book was, and she promptly told him he could get out of the trash.
Yeah, I got to put you on hold there. They're going to start posting the credits any second. Thanks so much for calling, Kelly. Thanks everybody else for tuning in. I think Kelly's call demonstrates one of the problems that we're talking about, which is that religion fosters this idea that you can't question anything, that you shouldn't question anything, that anything that offers evidence against your proposition is evil and must be destroyed. And that's the reason that we do this show, and that's the reason that we'll be back again next week. Thanks, Jen. Thanks to all the people who made the show happen and our studio audience, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.